Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third round of the 1958 Formula One World Championship, the Dutch Grand Prix, held here at the famous circuit of Zandvoort. This circuit, nestled in the dunes by the North Sea, carries a history unlike any other. The permanent track you see today rose from the scars of war, built upon the communication roads once laid by the occupying German army. In 1946, Le Mans winner Sammy Davis was invited as design advisor, though much of the layout was dictated by those wartime paths. Zandvoort wasn't just a racetrack, it was a seaside holiday destination with a circuit in the middle of it. Drivers often joked that the real hazards weren't the corners or the rivals, but the sand constantly blowing onto the asphalt and the seagulls stubbornly refusing to give way. Imagine braking late into Tarzan Corner, only to have a bird staring back at you. That's Zandvoort in the 1950s. And now, it's time to look at the men and machines brave enough to tackle it. Since the Monaco Grand Prix had taken place just a week earlier, little had changed in the paddock. The same teams, the same machinery, and the same eager faces, ready once again to test their luck. Ferrari, however, arrived in the Netherlands with renewed determination. Their weapon was the brand new 246 F1 Dino, already quick, but sent back to Maranello after Monaco for fine-tuning. The engineers worked feverishly to adapt its engine and setup for the fast, sweeping dunes of Zandvoort. For this race, Scuderia Ferrari lined up three of their main stars, Peter Collins, Mike Hawthorn, and Luigi Musso. Noticeably absent was Wolfgang von Trips. The young German's relationship with Ferrari had always been peculiar. Since 1956, he had been entrusted with the car only on select occasions, 5 in total. And yet he had already stood on the podium at Monza in 1957. Still, Enzo Ferrari withheld a permanent seat. Von Trips was caught in a strange limbo, talented enough to shine, but not yet a true fixture of the team. That would only change 2 years later, when Ferrari finally granted him full status as a works driver for the 1960 season. Despite failing to score a single championship point so far in 1958, Vanwall arrived at Zandvoort with quiet confidence. The shadow of their 1957 triumph still lingered, proof that both their machines and their drivers had the ability to conquer. Surely, it seemed impossible that such a team could remain mired in bad luck for long. For the Dutch Grand Prix, the lineup remained unchanged. Stirling Moss, Tony Brooks, and Stuart Lewis Evans. 3 proven drivers, each capable of victory and each hungry to finally turn the tide. Their Vanwalls were familiar too, though this time the team unveiled their classic streamlined chassis, sleek and aerodynamic, a machine meant to devour the fast Dutch straights and sweeping bends. The stakes were clear. Vanwall had to prove themselves, not just to the competition, but to their own loyal supporters. Yet pressure was nothing new for a team of this caliber. They had faced it before, and if their cars held together, few doubted their ability to fight for the front. The BRM, Lotus, and Cooper teams took a different path than the giants of Ferrari and Vanwall. Instead of returning home after Monaco, they journeyed straight to Zandvoort, a necessity born not of convenience, but of limited budgets. These outfits could not afford the luxury of cross-continental logistics, and so the road led them directly from Monte Carlo to the dunes of the Netherlands. Yet in the case of Lotus, Colin Chapman had a secret card up his sleeve. Fresh from England, the team received the brand new Coventry Climax FPF 2.2-litre engines, a step forward from their underpowered units. With time on their side, the mechanics mounted the new power plants into the slender Lotus 12 and carried out numerous tests around Zandvoort's fast, sweeping corners. The driver pairing remained unchanged. Cliff Allison and Graham Hill, each still with just a single Grand Prix start to their names. Their experience was minimal, their resources modest, but Lotus approached every weekend as another vital step in their education. For Chapman and his men, Formula One was still a classroom, and Zandvoort would be the next lesson in their steep, relentless learning curve. The Rob Walker racing team arrived at Zandvoort standing tall at the very top of the business. A remarkable achievement for a privateer outfit, in the cutthroat world of Formula One. They saw no reason to alter the formula that had just brought them success. Once again, they rolled out their trusted Cooper T45, and once again, it would be in the hands of a single driver, the reigning Monaco victor, Maurice Trintignant. Walker's philosophy was simple but effective. One car, one driver, both tested, both capable of victory. The question now is whether this lean and focused approach can deliver again on the fast, demanding sands of Zandvoort. And of course, no story of 1950s Formula One would be complete without its share of oddities. Here at Zandvoort, the local aristocrat, Count Karel Godin de Beaufort, has taken to the grid in truly unusual fashion. Behind the wheel of his very own 1.5-litre Porsche RSK sports car, a lone Formula 2 machine set against a field of full Formula 1 entries. This curious arrangement was made possible by the Dutch promoters themselves, who welcomed their countryman on one simple condition: that he keep out of the way of the far quicker cars whenever the situation demands. A gentleman's agreement in the purest spirit of the sport.
Dames en heren, hartelijk welkom bij de 6e grote prijs van Nederland, hier op het prachtige circuit van Zandvoort.
Qualifying for the 1958 Dutch Grand Prix stretched across 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and quickly turned into a showcase of Vanwall's sheer pace and engineering brilliance. From the opening laps of practice, the green machines surged ahead, their drivers carving out times that left the rest of the field scrambling for answers. By the end, the team had achieved the ultimate statement, the entire front row locked out by Vanwall. But the real surprise lay not with Moss or Brooks, but with the youngest of the trio, Stuart Lewis Evans. The crowd erupted as the quiet Englishman, often overshadowed by his teammates, firmly stamped his authority on the field. Behind the Vanwalls, the next real challenge came from the British Racing Motors squad. Alfred Owen's team, fresh off their progress in Monaco, again showed that the updated P25 was finally becoming a genuine contender. John Behra, aggressive and relentless as ever, dragged the car up to an impressive 4th place on the grid, while his teammate Harry Schell wasn't far behind this time, settling into 7th, proof that BRM were beginning to find consistency after years of frustration. And dear viewers, when we speak of notorious understeer, one name always seems to come up: Ferrari. Throughout their history, the Scuderia has been both admired and cursed for 2 defining traits: blistering straight-line speed and notorious understeer. Here at Zandvoort, the new 246 Dino proved no exception. The Scarlet machines tore down the straights with fury, only to wrestle and drift helplessly through the sweeping corners, their drivers fighting the steering wheel rather than the competition. But one man, Mike Hawthorn, refused to give in. The Englishman threw his Ferrari around with brute strength and sheer will, dragging it into 6th place and saving a little pride for Maranello. His teammates, though, a different story. Luigi Musso could do no better than 12th, and poor Peter Collins slipped and slid his way down to 10th, shaking his head as the car simply would not obey. Meanwhile, while Ferrari wrestled with their understeering beasts, the Coopers were quietly stealing the spotlight. The little rear-engine machines might not have had the raw horsepower of a Ferrari, but on the flowing corners of Zandvoort, balance and agility mattered more than brute force, and the Coopers had plenty of both. Jack Brabham, the tough Australian with grit carved into every lap, proved it best. He didn't just out-qualify Mike Hawthorn's Ferrari, he put himself all the way up into 5th place. And here's where the story gets even spicier. Officially, the team's newest 2.2-litre Coventry Climax engine was assigned to Roy Salvadori, the senior Cooper driver. But Brabham, never one to accept second best, quietly swapped the numbers on the cars and took Salvadori's faster machine for himself. It was a cheeky move, but it worked. The little team from Surbiton had embarrassed the mighty Scuderia Ferrari. The revolution of the rear engine was not just coming, it was already here. Meanwhile, qualifying was a sobering reminder of just how steep the climb remained for Team Lotus. Cliff Allison couldn't quite break into the elite. He had to settle for 11th place, just a 10th of a second shy of Peter Collins' Ferrari. As for Graham Hill, the Formula One Rookies weekend proved even more difficult. He could do no better than 13th fastest. For Colin Chapman's young team, The dream was alive, but Formula One was showing no mercy. And finally, at the very back, the oddest entry of them all, Count Karel Godin de Beaufort, with his privately entered Porsche sports car, a Formula 2 machine among thoroughbred Formula 1s, a true throwback to the eccentricities of 1950s racing.
En hier zijn de officiële kwalificatieresultaten voor de 6e grote prijs van Nederland. Eerste plaats, wagen nummer 3 uit het Verenigd Koninkrijk, Stuart Lewis Evans in de Vanwall, met een rondetijd van 1 minuut 37,1. Tweede plaats, wagen nummer 1, ook uit het Verenigd Koninkrijk, Stirling Moss in een Vanwall, slechts 0,9 seconden trager. Derde plaats, wagen nummer 2, eveneens uit het Verenigd Koninkrijk, Tony Brooks in een Vanwall, plus 1,0 seconden. Vierde plaats, wagen nummer 14, de Fransman Behra in een BRM, plus 1,3 seconden. Vijfde plaats, wagen nummer 8, de Australiër Jack Brabham in een Cooper, plus 1,4 seconden. Zesde plaats, wagen nummer 5, de Brit Hawthorn in een Ferrari, plus 2,0 seconden. Zevende plaats, wagen nummer 15, de Amerikaan Harry Schell in een BRM, plus 2,1 seconden. Achtste plaats, wagen nummer 9, de Fransman Maurice Trintignant met de Rock Walker Team Cooper, plus 2,1 seconden. De Lotus van Allison en Hill kon zich niet in de top 10 kwalificeren. Maar laten we niet vergeten dat Colin Chapman's team nog een absolute debutant is in de Formule 1. We zijn benieuwd wat de toekomst voor dit Engelse team in petto heeft. En helemaal achteraan, op de laatste startpositie, staat onze lokale held. De 24-jarige baron Karel Pieter Antoni Jan Hubertus Karel Godin de Beaufort in zijn eigen Porsche 550 Spider. Zijn kans op punten is klein, maar hij rijdt voor het publiek. Dus dames en heren, laat hem horen. Steun onze landgenoot met luid gejuich. De lucht boven ons geeft ons die typische sfeer van de grote prijs van Nederland. Grijze wolken, frisse wind en ja, een kleine kans op regen. Maar dat is niets nieuws hier in de duinen. Het weer is altijd een deel van de uitdaging, een deel van de legende. Vandaag staat de afstand vast volgens de nieuwe regels. 75 ronden, goed voor 314,4 kilometer. Oftewel 195,4 mijl vol snelheid, strijd en uithoudingsvermogen. Alleen de sterkste auto's en de moedigste coureurs halen de finish. En kijk eens naar de startopstelling. De Vanwalls aan de kop, met de woedende Ferraris midden in het veld. Dat is een garantie voor een harde, meedogenloze race, vol duels en aanvallen. De spanning op de tribunes is al elektrisch. We kunnen het niet langer tegenhouden. Dus dames en heren, houdt u vast. De 6e grote prijs van Nederland begint in 3, 2, 1, nu!
As the flag dropped, Stirling Moss leapt off the line like lightning. No surprise there, he's always been a master of the getaway, and once ahead, he's one of the hardest men in the sport to dislodge. Behind him, the pack surged through in unison, each car clawing for space on Zandvoort's narrow strip of tarmac. Yet, remarkably, it was a clean start all around. Not a single mistake, not a single car thrown away, proof that this grid truly gathers the finest drivers in the world. Trouble struck Tony Brooks early on. His Vanwall began to handle strangely, forcing him to dive into the pits. Brooks climbed out while the mechanics swarmed over the car, carefully checking the wheels and rear end for any obvious fault. But nothing appeared amiss. With no solution in sight, they reluctantly sent him back out. By then, the damage was done. Brooks had lost a mountain of time for no gain, rejoining at the very back of the field, his hopes of a strong finish all but gone. By lap 4, Mike Hawthorn was closing fast on Jack Brabham. The Australian, back in his original car with the smaller engine, did what he could to defend, but the odds were against him. The Ferrari 246 had the strongest engine in the field, and once Hawthorn filled his mirrors, the outcome was inevitable. With little resistance, the Englishman swept past, leaving Brabham powerless to respond. Once unleashed, Hawthorn was a force to be reckoned with. His next target, the new BRM of Behra. The updated car was no slouch, but it was no match for the screaming Ferrari 246. Hawthorn applied relentless pressure, forcing Behra to yield, and just like that, the Englishman was through. Finally, a Ferrari had broken into the points. Peter Collins had clearly seen enough. He pressed down hard on the accelerator, putting Brabham under immediate pressure. But the story of this race was simple. Horsepower spoke louder than skill alone. On lap 6, Collins made his move and swept past Brabham with ease. Brabham's misery deepened, but it wasn't over yet. In his mirrors appeared Cliff Allison's Lotus 12, packing a 2.2-litre engine. The underpowered Cooper could fight with agility, but the Lotus had the edge. Allison seized the moment, slotted past the Australian, and just like that, Brabham tumbled down to 9th place. Back at the sharp end of the field, Moss was already carving out a commanding lead, his Vanwall gliding effortlessly around Zandvoort. But behind him, the real fireworks began. Harry Schell, at the wheel of the newly refined BRM, was in no mood to settle quietly. Lap after lap, he closed the gap on Stuart Lewis-Evans, filling the young Englishman's mirrors. The pressure built relentlessly, Lewis-Evans fighting to keep his composure. But on lap 12, the inevitable came. Schell found his moment, darted past with authority, and snatched 2nd place. The BRM was alive, and the crowd knew it. Schell was on the charge. And then, something no one could have predicted. The underdog story began to write itself. Cliff Allison, in the lightweight but underpowered Lotus, closed in on the Scarlet Ferrari of Peter Collins. On paper, it should have been no contest. Ferrari's 246 Dino against a brand new, barely tested Lotus 12. Yet, through the flowing curves of Zandvoort, Chapman's creation danced, nimble and precise, while the Ferrari wrestled with its notorious understeer. The crowd could scarcely believe it. A Lotus ahead of a Ferrari. For Colin Chapman, it was the first sweet taste of what might be possible. And for Enzo Ferrari, watching from afar, it must have been a moment of sheer disbelief. Lap 21 brought a surge of fury from Behra. The Frenchman seemed possessed, pushing his BRM harder than ever before. First, he lunged past Mike Hawthorn, leaving the Ferrari looking clumsy in comparison. Barely had the crowd settled when Behra struck again. This time diving past Roy Salvadori's Cooper with breathtaking confidence. Who, just a few months earlier, would have dared predict such a sight? The once hapless BRMS, forever mocked as backmarkers, were now carving their way through the field with real authority. For the first time, it felt as though Alfred Owen's team had finally arrived. Almost as if answering Behra's charge, it was now Luigi Musso's turn to unleash his fury. Sitting a miserable 10th in a Ferrari was nothing short of humiliation, and the Roman made it clear he would not accept it. He dropped the hammer, the 246 Dino roaring down the straights with all its might. First, poor Jack Brabham was swept aside. His underpowered Cooper stood no chance. Barely a lap later, Musso found his own teammate Peter Collins, filling the mirrors. No hesitation, no mercy. Musso blasted past, climbing to 8th place. The message was clear. Musso was on the warpath. But Collins' troubles were far from over. Few laps later, disaster struck. The gearbox jammed without warning. The Ferrari twitched violently, and Collins was thrown off the circuit, powerless to fight it. His race was finished in an instant. For the Scuderia, one car was already gone, and the day was starting to look darker. And now, dear Petrolheads, we're going for a flying lap around the classic Zandvoort circuit. And our chauffeur is none other than Stirling Moss himself. Let's see what this track looked and felt like back in 1958. Across the start-finish line, the Vanwall howling, the crowd only a blur, sand dunes looming on the horizon, heavy on the brakes for Tarzanbocht. Almost as tight and slow as the station hairpin in Monaco, Moss guides the Vanwall in with precision, wrestling with the steering to keep momentum alive through this corner. A short burst of acceleration, then a right kink before we dive left into Hugenholzbocht. A sharp little hairpin, named after the future Zandvoort director. Again, very slow, very technical. It's about balance and patience here. Now the car can breathe. Through the Hunzerug right-left sweepers. But don't think this is flat out. In the 1950s, with skinny tires and no downforce, Moss still has to ease off the throttle. It's a flowing but delicate combination. And here comes the beast, Scheiflak. A long, fast, sweeping right-hander that tries to spit the car straight into the sand dunes. The forces push Moss outwards, but his skill keeps the Vanwall right on the edge. Now we arrive at Hondenvlak, the quickest section so far. Up until here, the circuit feels almost modern. Approaching Tunnel Ost, deceptive, treacherous. Next is Panorama Bocht, and with almost zero downforce in 1958, Moss cannot simply keep it pinned. Another lift, another dance between bravery and physics. And finally, hard on the brakes for Pullefeld, the last real corner. A wide sweeping bend that feeds us back onto the long start-finish straight.
Dames en heren, hier komt de leider van de race. De 28-jarige reizende ster en ware rijgenier, Stirling Moss. Sinds Juan Manuel Fangio er vandaag niet bij is, wisten we allemaal dat hij de man was om te verslaan. En kijk naar zijn machine, de Vanwall VW5. Het neusje van de zalm van de techniek. Uitgerust met schijfremmen en geavanceerde aerodynamica.
As the laps ticked by, the race began to take shape. Moss was in a league of his own, already more than half a minute clear, a dominance that evoked memories of Fangio at his very best. Behind him, the order settled with Shell chasing in second, followed by Lewis Evans, Behra and Salvadori making up the top five. But just as the race seemed to stabilize, disaster struck. A sharp plume of smoke erupted from Lewis Evans' Vanwall. The engine had suffered a broken valve. In a flash of fire and noise, his race was over. The young Englishman coasted to the side of the track, climbing out in frustration. So now, the race truly settled into its rhythm. By lap 50 of the 75, the order was locked in, and for the next 25 laps, not a single overtake or major incident unfolded. A rare sight in Formula One. 25 consecutive laps of pure status quo. But that's part of the charm of 1950s Grand Prix racing. Its unpredictability lies as much in the long, uneventful stretches as in the sudden bursts of chaos. Strange, unusual, but absolutely characteristic of the era. And then, the checkered flag beckoned. Stirling Moss, who had never once relinquished the lead since the start, crossed the line in commanding fashion. His margin over Harry Schell was an emphatic 47 seconds, a crushing demonstration of pace and control. For Moss, it was a triumphant return to the top of the championship standings. For Vanwall, it marked their first victory of the season, restoring pride to Tony van der Velde's ambitious project. The celebrations did not end there. Alfred Owen's BRM squad also had reason to cheer, with Jan Behra bringing home third place, securing the team's first ever double podium in Formula One, alongside Shell's second. A landmark achievement for a team that not long ago was dismissed as perennial backmarkers. Further down, Roy Salvadori delivered a strong fourth place for Cooper, keeping the small team's incredible consistency alive and ensuring they retained the lead in the Constructors' Championship. And in fifth, it was Mike Hawthorn who salvaged dignity for Ferrari, sparing the Scuderia the humiliation of leaving Zandvoort empty-handed. So, after 3 rounds, the championship picture shifts once again. Stirling Moss, with his second victory of the season, now sits firmly at the top of the standings, looking every bit the man to beat. Behind him, Luigi Musso leaves Zandvoort empty-handed, but still holds second place, while Maurice Trintignant, Harry Schell and Mike Hawthorn keep themselves in striking distance. But we are still in the early days of the 1958 season, and if Formula One has taught us anything, it's that momentum can change in an instant. The fight for the crown is far from over, because in this sport, anything can happen, and it usually does. Every team left Zandvoort with something to show for their efforts, but the real star of the day was Vanwall. With Moss's commanding victory, they broke into the Constructors' Championship in style. collecting 8 valuable points that immediately lift them into third place. Yet, despite the British green surge, it is still Cooper who holds the lead at the top. What a season this is turning out to be. And dear viewers, this is exactly what Grand Prix TV lives for. The crashes, the overtakes, the mad moments. This is what fuels us. These videos are made for you, and every single comment you leave is our true reward, our reflection of why we take on this behemoth of a project, our reason to keep digging through endless race footage, instead of, having a normal social life. But we don't slow down, not for a second. The journey continues, and the next stop is a double feature, one of the crown jewels of motorsport, the Indianapolis 500, together with the legendary Belgian Grand Prix. All in one episode, all right here. So dear viewers, stay tuned, because we simply can't stop.